The email notification was a digital guillotine. Subject: Project Chimera Performance Review. I was David Chen, a senior developer at Omnicore Dynamics, and Chimera was my baby. I'd poured 2 years into it, coding through countless Seattle nights, convinced I was building something revolutionary. But the name in the project lead field wasn't mine. It was Mark Renshaw's. My stomach twisted into a knot of ice. The meeting was in 10 minutes. My boss, Sarah, sat across from me, her expression unreadable. Mark was already there, smirking. "David," Sarah began, her voice cold as a server room, "we have a problem with your performance on Mark's project." Time project. The words caught in my throat. Mark Renshaw wasn't a coder, he was a politician in a cheap suit. He'd arrived a year ago, all charisma and firm handshakes, mastering the art of explaining complex algorithms he didn't understand to executives who didn't care. I was the opposite, a ghost in the machine. I'd been at Omnicore for 15 years, a senior developer who preferred the clean logic of code to the messy politics of people. I thought my boss Sarah respected that. I thought we had a rapport built on years of solid work. But looking at her now, her eyes were as cold as the polished granite of the conference table. "Mark has flagged significant inefficiencies," Sarah said, her voice flat. She slid a printout towards me. It was a section of my code, my elegant, handcrafted code, marred by Mark's aggressive red scrawl. He's had to spend the last month rewriting entire modules just to get Chimera back on track. Rewriting? He wouldn't know where to start. The man was a parasite. "The launch is in jeopardy, David," Sarah continued, ignoring my stunned silence. "Effective immediately, you're on probation, and you'll be reporting directly to Mark on this project." Reporting to Mark. The 2 words echoed in the sterile silence as I walked out, leaving him and Sarah to finalize my public execution. There was nothing I could say. Arguing would only make me look defensive, unstable. Mark had already painted that picture of me, and Sarah was holding the frame. My desk felt foreign, a crime scene where my career was the victim. The hum of the servers, usually a comfort, now sounded like a jeering crowd. This hadn't happened overnight. It was a slow, methodical poisoning that began 6 months ago, when Mark cornered me by the coffee machine. "David, you're a legend," he'd said, his smile as wide and empty as a politician's promise. "But no one upstairs understands your genius. Let me be your translator." It sounded like a partnership. I was a fool. Sarah bought into it completely. "We need better cross-functional visibility," she'd announced a week later, granting Mark full administrative access to my repository. "Mark will handle the stakeholder comms." I had objected, explaining that the project's architecture was too complex for a non-technical lead to manage. She'd just smiled. "That's why he has you, David." And so translation began. Mark scheduled daily, deep dives. He'd sit in my office, recording our conversations as I walked him through the intricacies of the Chimera core. I'd spend hours explaining cryptographic handshakes and asynchronous data streams. The next day, I'd see my words, my exact architectural concepts, pasted into his slick PowerPoint decks, presented to VPs under a slide titled "My Strategic Vision." He wasn't just stealing the credit, he was stealing my voice. The inefficiencies, he flagged, were a masterstroke of deception. He took a diagnostic module I'd written for stress testing, a temporary tool, intentionally resource-intensive, and presented it as a permanent, critical flaw in the system's core logic. He pointed to my detailed developer comments, full of technical shorthand, and called them unintelligible and non-compliant documentation. Sarah didn't speak Python, she spoke PowerPoint, and Mark was fluent. I finally understood. My mistake wasn't a bug in the code. My mistake was believing the code was all that mattered. I had built Chimera to be perfect, secure, and elegant, but I'd forgotten to build a defense against the one virus that no firewall could stop, a human being with a smile, a thesaurus, and no conscience. As I sat down, the screen reflecting my own grim face, a cold clarity washed over me. Mark may have stolen the project, but he didn't understand it. He had the keys to the kingdom, but he had no idea what traps lay inside the castle walls. He didn't know about the ghost I'd left in my own machine. The next morning, probation felt like a physical weight. My keycard still worked, a small miracle. Mark summoned me to his new office. My old office, at 9 a.m. sharp. He was leaning back in my chair, feet on my desk, a coffee mug that said, "World's Best Boss," sitting on a stack of my old design documents. The irony was a punch to the gut. "Chen," he said, not bothering to look up from his phone. "I've been reviewing your commit history. It's a mess, no cohesion. From now on, you push nothing, not a single line, without my explicit approval." I just nodded, understood. My days became a slow-motion torture. Mark would call me in to ideate. He'd sketch clumsy diagrams on the whiteboard, using marketing buzzwords like synergy and paradigm shift to describe basic server functions I'd coded years ago. My job was to nod and say, "That's a great angle, Mark," then go back to my cubicle and translate his nonsense into functional code, which he would then present as his own work. He was a conductor waving a stick at a symphony he couldn't hear. He started making changes himself, trivial things. He'd rename variables from _tempcache to _mark r_cache_v2 , a digital dog marking its territory. He'd add bloated, useless comments above my functions, explaining them incorrectly. Each commit was a small act of vandalism, and my instructions were to approve every single one. I was being forced to personally sign off on the desecration of my own work, but through it all, I played the part of the broken man. I was quiet, compliant, and helpful. I answered his dumbest questions with patience. I even complimented his insight. He was so blinded by his own ego, he never saw the truth. I wasn't just cooperating. I was grooming him. The ghost in the machine was an undocumented administrative module I'd built into Chimera's core. I called it the Arbiter Protocol. It was my masterpiece of paranoia, a kill switch and recovery tool rolled into one. It was designed to perform a system-wide integrity check, cross-referencing every line of code against its original, cryptographically signed version in a hidden repository. If it found unauthorized changes, it would quarantine them, roll back the entire system to the last secure state, and fire off a high-priority security alert to the entire executive board, complete with a detailed, unalterable log of the offending code and the user who committed it. It was a digital god, and only I knew the prayers to summon it. During one of our agonizing code reviews, I baited the hook. "The one thing I never fully integrated," I said, sighing as if in defeat, "was the automated deployment key. It's a legacy module, but it could theoretically push a final build to the live servers from a single command." Mark's eyes lit up. A one-command launch he could initiate himself? The glory would be immense. "Where is it?" he demanded. "It's not user-facing," I said, feigning reluctance. "It's too powerful. It requires a specific sequence, a kind of final system handshake to activate." "Show me," he ordered, his voice dripping with greed. That afternoon, I walked him through a series of commands. I carefully omitted the final, critical step, the one that distinguished the Arbiter's integrity audit from a standard deployment. I framed the protocol as his silver bullet, a tool for a true leader to bypass the grunts and take personal control of the launch. I watched him type out the sequence, his fingers dancing on the keyboard, a fool learning a magic trick that was actually a self-destruct code. He saved the commands in a private text file on his desktop, labeling it my_launch_sequence.txt. He thought he was seizing the scepter. He had no idea he was just polishing the blade of the guillotine. Launch day arrived with the suffocating quiet of a courtroom before the verdict. The office buzzed with a nervous energy that couldn't penetrate the bubble of calm around my cubicle. I spent the morning methodically clearing my desk, archiving old files, sipping my coffee, black. I was a man tidying up before a long vacation. Mark, meanwhile, was a peacock on parade. He strode through the aisles, slapping backs, his voice booming with false modesty. It was a team effort, he'd say, but at the end of the day, leadership has to make the tough calls. At 2 p.m., we were all herded into the main conference room, the one with the panoramic view of the Seattle skyline. The board members were dialed in on the big screen, their pixelated faces expectant. Sarah stood beside Mark at the podium, beaming. She looked at me once, a flicker of something, pity, maybe, before turning her full attention back to her golden boy. I took a seat at the back, invisible, a ghost already haunting the machine. Project Chimera is more than software, Mark began, his voice echoing with practiced importance. It's a new paradigm for Omnicore. He clicked through a deck of slides I recognized, my architectural diagrams, my data flow charts, just with his name in the footer. He spoke of scalability and synergy, of disruptive innovation. He was conducting my symphony with a stolen baton, and the audience was giving him a standing ovation. Finally, the moment arrived. And now, Mark announced, turning to the terminal projected on the screen for all to see, I will personally initiate the final deployment. A single, elegant command to launch the future. He opened the text file on his desktop, my_launch_sequence.txt. My heart didn't pound. It was a metronome, slow and steady. Every beat counted down the last seconds of his career. I watched him paste the long string of commands into the root console. He paused, soaking in the admiration, a king addressing his court. His eyes swept the room and met mine. He gave a tiny, triumphant smirk. "I'm Mauj. This is my kingdom now, Chen." I returned a slow, deliberate nod. "Enjoy your reign." He turned back to the keyboard. His finger hovered over the Enter key. I thought of the Arbiter protocol, sleeping deep in the server racks. A silent guardian I'd built for just this kind of betrayal. I wasn't watching a man launch a project. I was watching a man meticulously document his own fraud, package it, and deliver it directly to the CEO. A detailed, time-stamped, and cryptographically irrefutable confession. His finger pressed down. The key clicked, a sound no louder than a pin drop, but it was the shot that started the war. For a fraction of a second, nothing happened. The command line blinked, a silent cursor on an empty stage. Mark's smirk remained frozen on his face. Then, the screen flickered. Text scrolled, too fast to read, a cascade of white on black. But the final message that resolved on the giant display wasn't "deployment successful." It was a single, sterile line, backquote, Arbiter protocol activated, system integrity audit in progress, backquote. Below it, a progress bar appeared, crisp and blue. It began to fill, slowly, with unnerving precision. The silence in the room became heavy, suffocating. Mark's smile evaporated. He stared at the screen, his face a mask of confusion. "It's just running a final diagnostic," he stammered, his voice a little too loud. "Standard procedure before a major push. For stability." He glanced at Sarah, seeking confirmation, but her eyes were narrowed, a fissure of doubt cracking her confident facade. The executives on the video call were silent, their pixelated faces impassive, watching. They were all watching the screen. But they should have been watching me. I stood up. The single motion of my chair scraping against the floor was a thunderclap in the quiet room. Every head turned. I didn't look at Mark. I didn't look at Sarah. I walked calmly, deliberately, to the front of the room, my footsteps echoing the steady beat of my heart. I stood beside the podium, a ghost taking solid form, and addressed the disembodied faces on the screen. "What you're seeing is not a diagnostic," I said, my voice even and clear. It carried easily in the tense silence. "It's a security feature I built into the core of Project Chimera, an anti-tampering mechanism I called the Arbiter Protocol." Mark finally found his voice. "He's lying. This is sabotage. He's a disgruntled employee trying to destroy the launch." I ignored him, keeping my eyes on the board members. The Arbiter is comparing every single line of code in the current build against the original cryptographically signed commits, stored in a secure, hidden repository. It's designed to detect and log any unauthorized or malicious modifications. It's a feature I designed to protect our intellectual property from internal threats. The blue bar on the screen hit 100%. The message changed. Backquote. Audit complete. Generating report. Backquote. A document bloomed onto the display, pristine and formatted like an official corporate filing. The title was stark. Backquote, Chimera, System Integrity Audit Report. Backquote. Below it, a list began to populate. A long, scrolling list. Each entry was a digital indictment. Backquote. Entry 001. Backquote. Backquote, commit. ID 7C4A8D09. Backquote. Backquote, user M_Renshaw. Backquote. Backquote, timestamp 3 weeks ago. Backquote. Backquote, flag. Unauthorized cosmetic change. No functional value. Backquote. Backquote, detail. Renamed internal variable _temp cache to markr_cache_v2 dot. Backquote. Backquote. Entry 002. Backquote. Backquote, user added 14 lines of comments incorrectly explaining the function of the AES encryption module. Backquote. The list went on and on, detailing every clumsy ego-driven change. Then came the masterstroke. The report flagged the very modules Mark had used to frame me. Backquote. Entry 087. Backquote. Backquote, commit ID 4D5F6A7B. Backquote. Backquote, user M_Renshaw. Backquote. Backquote, timestamp 1 month ago. Backquote. Backquote, detail, misrepresentative stress_test_alpha module, a temporary developer tool, was flagged by user M_Renshaw in performance review as a critical inefficiency. Arbiter analysis confirms the module is isolated and not part of the production build. Original documentation by D_Chen clearly states its purpose and intended temporary status. Backquote. The evidence was cold, factual, and irrefutable. It was a perfect, digital record of his fraud. Suddenly, a phone buzzed on the conference table. Then another. Then a dozen more. A wave of notification chimes swept through the room, a jarring, electronic chorus. On the main screen, the CEO, a man named Peterson, looked down at his own phone. His face, already grim, hardened into granite. "I have just received," Peterson's voice boomed from the speakers, cutting through the noise, "a Priority 1 security alert. It contains this full report. It also contains an unalterable log of the command sequence Mr. Renshaw just executed. And, for context, it seems to have attached the original, signed project charter and commit logs from a Mr. David Chen." Every eye in the room, real and virtual, was now fixed on Mark. He was white as a sheet, his suit suddenly looking 2 sizes too big. He pointed a shaking finger at me, his last, desperate gambit. "He tricked me! He told me that was the launch sequence." I finally turned to look at him, letting the silence hang for a beat. I spoke not to him but to Sarah and the board. I didn't trick him. I told him it was a powerful command sequence that required a final system handshake. A true project lead would have known what that meant. A true project lead would have read the core architectural documents, where the Arbiter protocol is fully and plainly documented. I let my gaze settle on Sarah, her face ashen. "You gave Mark full administrative access. You told me to report to him. I did. Every single one of his commits you ordered me to approve. I was just following orders, creating a perfect, unbroken chain of evidence for the system to audit." The implication landed with the force of a physical blow. Her failure of leadership was now part of the official record. I bent down and picked up the messenger bag I had placed by my chair earlier. I slung it over my shoulder. The Arbiter's report also contains the command sequence to roll back the entire system to my last stable build. It will take about 90 seconds. Chimera is perfectly safe. The real launch can proceed whenever you like. I turned and walked towards the door, the stunned silence of the room at my back. No one moved to stop me. As my hand touched the handle, Peterson's voice echoed one last time, no longer directed at the screen, but thundering at the man at the podium. "Renshaw, don't you move a damn inch!" I walked out and didn't look back. The door clicked shut behind me, sealing them in their boardroom tomb. My symphony was over. The conductor was facing the music. The walk from the conference room to the elevator was the longest and shortest of my life. I passed rows of cubicles, a sea of faces frozen in a mixture of shock and awe. Some looked away, not wanting to be associated with the explosion. Others, the ones who had seen Mark's bullying up close, gave me small, almost imperceptible nods. They knew. The elevator doors slid open with a soft chime, a sound that felt like a final punctuation mark. As they closed, I saw Sarah's face for a split second through the shrinking gap, her expression a ruin of panic and regret. I didn't stop at my desk. There was nothing there for me. I'd packed my life into that messenger bag this morning. I walked straight to the main glass doors of Omnicore Dynamics, the corporate logo gleaming under the track lighting. My key card, still in my pocket, felt like a relic from another life. I didn't need it. A security guard, seeing my bag, simply nodded and held the door open. The Seattle air hit me, cool and damp, smelling of rain and exhaust. It was the smell of freedom. The muted roar of downtown traffic was a welcome chaos after the sterile silence of that boardroom. I walked without a destination, my feet carrying me past coffee shops and storefronts, just putting distance between me and that building. My phone stayed silent in my pocket. For 10 beautiful minutes, the world let me be. Then, the first vibration. A blocked number. I ignored it. A minute later, a text from Sarah. "David, please call me. We need to talk." I deleted it without reading. Then my phone rang again, Sarah's name flashing on the screen. I pressed the red icon, silencing her. It was a small act, but it felt monumental. It was the first time in a year I had denied her anything. I found a small park, a patch of green wedged between glass towers, and sat on a bench. The phone buzzed again. This time, it was a number I didn't recognize, but the area code was for our corporate headquarters in New York. I knew who it was. I let it ring 4 times, then answered. "Chen," I said. The voice on the other end was clipped, all business. "Peterson, where are you?" "Enjoying some fresh air," I replied. My voice even. There was a pause. I could hear muffled shouting in the background, a chaotic counterpoint to his strained calm. "Renshaw has been terminated. Security is escorting him from the premises as we speak. Sarah's future at this company is under immediate review." "Okay," I said. It wasn't a question, it was a statement of fact. "Look, Chen." Peterson's voice shifted, a clumsy attempt at conciliation. "What happened in there was a catastrophic failure of management. We know who built Chimera. The board knows. We need you to see this launch through." "The rollback command is in the report," I stated flatly. "The system is stable. Anyone with root access can initiate the launch." "That's not the point, and you know it. We need the architect. Your name will be on it. We'll issue a company-wide correction. A promotion. Head of Special Projects. You can write your own ticket." "Write my own ticket." That's what Sarah had said when I first pitched Chimera, 2 years ago. The words tasted like ash. I watched a ferry glide across the gray waters of the Puget Sound. "Mr. Peterson," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "For the last 6 months, I have been systematically gaslit, humiliated, and punished for doing my job. Your management structure enabled a con man to hijack a $10 million project. You didn't believe my work. You believed his PowerPoint. We're fixing that," he insisted, a note of desperation creeping in. "No," I said. "You're not fixing it. You're patching a security hole after the breach. The system itself is corrupt. It rewards the loudest voice, not the best work. I can't work in a system like that." The silence on his end was profound. He knew I was right. "What do you want, Chen?" he finally asked, the question heavy with resignation. "Nothing you can offer me," I said, and ended the call. I sat there for a long time, the phone silent in my hand. I had won. But it didn't feel like a victory celebration. It felt like balance. Like a complex equation finally resolving to zero. An hour later, a text message came through from Alex, a junior developer I'd mentored. Backquote. "They just walked Sarah out. She didn't have a box. Her office is dark. We're all in shock. Your arbiter protocol is a legend." Backquote. A small smile touched my lips. I typed back a simple reply. Backquote. "Good code tells the truth." Backquote. I stood up and put the phone away. The gray Seattle sky was beginning to break. A sliver of blue promising a clearer afternoon. I didn't know where I was going next, but for the first time in years the path forward felt like my own. I didn't go home. Instead, I found myself in a small, independent bookstore cafe downtown, the kind with worn-out armchairs and the smell of old paper and roasted coffee. It was a place where logic and stories coexisted peacefully. I ordered an espresso and opened my personal laptop, not out of habit but out of a need to reconnect with the machine on my own terms. An hour passed. Then two. I didn't write a single line of code. I just sat there, watching the cursor blink on a blank screen, a digital heartbeat that finally felt in sync with my own. The noise of my old life was fading. Then, a quiet notification pinged from a corner of my screen. It wasn't an email or a news alert. It was a message on a private, encrypted developer forum I hadn't checked in months. The sender's handle was a legend, Praxis, a revered, semi-anonymous, open-source pioneer known for a fierce commitment to engineering ethics. A ghost in the machine, much like myself, but one the entire world respected. My own ghost had just reported a crime. His had built cathedrals of open-source software. My hands were steady as I opened the message. It was brutally concise. Backquote. "Heard about Omnicore. Saw a leaked copy of the Arbiter report. That wasn't revenge. It was a formal proof. The most elegant piece of justice I've seen in a decade. You wrote a system that forced a corrupt institution to audit and sentence itself. That's not just code, it's poetry." Backquote. I read it again and again. The words were a balm on a wound I didn't know was still bleeding. A second message appeared a moment later. Backquote. "When you're done enjoying the silence, the world needs better architects. My door is open." Backquote. Beneath it was a single string of encrypted text, not a job offer, not a contact number, it was a key. An invitation to a place where the code was all that mattered. I closed the laptop. The anger I'd carried for so long had finally settled. It wasn't a fire anymore. It was fuel. Mark and Sarah had tried to erase my name, but in doing so they had broadcast it to the one corner of the world where it was truly understood. My code had told the truth. And the right people had been listening. What's the most clever and subtle way you've ever gotten back at a coworker? Let me know your story in the comments.